Okay, appreciate you watching this video. It's about the Phoenix model Sonic, and what we're going to do in this video is to fix up the throttle servo. Before we get into the details of it, I want to remind you two things. I mentioned in a previous video that I noted that the throttle arm on the engine works backwards from the OS. I'm used to using OS engines. Thunder Tigers are good, but it works backwards. So if you haven't already done so, be sure to change the throttle servo to not be reversed. That's not be reversed. So if you haven't done that, get out your bind plug, change it in the radio first, turn radio off, put your bind plug in, turn the power on your battery, and go through the bind procedure. And then that way you need to make sure that when you push the throttle forward, you can watch the servo push the arm toward the tail of the aircraft. Okay, so which is just opposite of what OS does, and that's okay. Okay, so what do you do with the throttle servo? First off, simply enough, put the throttle servo in the airplane. Very simple, just screw it in the 4 screws that we already drilled pilot holes for. Okay, but when you do that, don't have the arm in, okay? And obviously the screw for that arm, you don't need that in yet. Because what we have to do is put that arm with the quick connect on the push rod. So I'm going to make sure the throttle is closed, okay, which is all the way forward, okay, and I'm going to pull out the push rod for the throttle and slide it onto the quick connect, and then try to put the arm of the servo about halfway, slide it about halfway of it in its limit, where it slides back and forth. And let me screw that in and I'll show it to you. Okay. Now the quick connect is obviously loose, it needs to be loose. Okay. But you can go ahead and tighten down the throttle servo screw. Okay. So there's the throttle arm, and that arm is about halfway. Now you need to make sure, obviously, that it does not touch the side of the aircraft. Okay. Okay, so turn the radio on. Throttle is all the way back. Turn on the receiver. Find the switch here. Turn on the receiver. Okay, and because the quick connect is not tight, you can move the throttle arm up here back and forth inside that quick connect. So the other thing you want to do is make sure your trim is all the way down. So I actually have mine in neutral right now, so I'm going to put the trim all the way back down to -100. Throttle trim is to -100. And then with a flashlight, make it easier to see, find where that throttle is completely closed. It can go more than closed, and so I'm going to have it where it's just barely closed, but it is closed, okay? And with the throttle trim all the way back and the throttle stick all the way back, that's the point at which no air is getting into the carburetor and the engine dies. So I'm going to tighten the quick connect. Okay, and we're going to test it. So the first thing I'm going to test is, does there a small little crack open up when I move the throttle trim from -100 to 0? Okay, and you can hear that 0 sound. That higher pitch sound means it's at 0. Okay, so with it at 0, we should see a little crack here. And we see a crack, but it's not enough. So what I'm going to do is open up the quick connect a little bit. Loosen it up enough to have about 1/8 of an inch crack. And it's going to be hard to show you on the camera, but that little opening is about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Now, if I pull the trim all the way back to -100, that should close, and it does. Okay. So it's closed, but when I go from -100 to 0, that crack opens up just about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Now we won't know exactly where that is until we actually run the engine for the first time, but all we're trying to do is get close. So now I'm going to leave that trim at 0, and then watch the throttle arm move it open to 100%. Okay. I can hear when it hits 100% that buzzing a little, meaning it's hitting a stop. So what that means is the throttle servo setup at 100%. Okay, I want that to be a little less. So that was 60, if you remember. So I'm going to try to set it at about 50, and check it again, and listen for any buzzing. Yeah. Okay. So the top number on that is now 50. Okay, and the bottom number is 60. Okay. So we can adjust those endpoints, are called. We can adjust those endpoints as we need. And if we have to adjust the endpoint for the bottom, we will, but I think it's going to be okay. So now that is moving from 100% to idle with a little less than a 1/8 inch crack with the throttle trim at 0, and we're good to go. Okay, so that's it for getting the throttle adjusted. Now the wire behind the throttle servo will have to be cut off at some point, but I'm not going to do that until I put the servo in behind it, and we'll do that in the next video, or subsequent videos, one of the subsequent videos. So that's the throttle servo. It's in place. It is moving the throttle arm in the correct direction, and the trim, the trim for the throttle will cut off the engine if you want. And later on, I'll show you how we, when we do more programming on the DX7, I'll show you how to do throttle cut with a button up top. But that's for another video. So, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.